I took my daughter's hand and walked away from that shed. The shocked faces of her in-laws didn't matter to me. Not one bit, because the daughter they had humiliated and controlled was leaving with her only child in my arms. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The highway stretched ahead like a black ribbon melting under the late summer sun. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, though my body had learned to endure far worse than heat or exhaustion. I am Margaret Hayes, 52 years old, a mother who has fought through years of sacrifices, heartbreak, and endless worry for her children. Gray streaked my dark hair, my hands bore the marks of hard work, but my eyes were still sharp and determined, the same eyes that had protected my children since the day they were born. I hadn't heard properly from my daughter, Sophie, in 3 weeks. Not really. Her texts were short, carefully worded. "Mom, I'm busy with house stuff. Don't worry." That wasn't Sophie. She had never been careful with words around me. She had always shouted, laughed too loud, argued fiercely. These messages, they were sterile, distant, alien. My heart sank every time my phone buzzed, hoping it was her real voice, and instead it was a polite, hollow phrase I barely recognized. When I reached the town of Elmwood, my stomach tightened. The place was quiet and immaculate, with modern homes trying desperately to look grand and affluent. I had visited twice since Sophie's wedding a year ago. Both times, her in-laws had made it painfully obvious I didn't belong in their world of wealth and control. I found Sycamore Lane, the address etched into my memory like a scar. The houses grew larger as I drove down the tree-lined street, lawns so perfectly trimmed they looked fake, every tree in place as if rehearsed for a photograph. At the end of the lane loomed the Whitmore estate. 6 bedrooms, sparkling pool, immaculately landscaped gardens, the kind of house that screamed power and privilege. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I parked my SUV and took a slow, steadying breath. The front door opened before I could knock. Margaret Whitmore herself stood there, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a pale pastel dress that did nothing to soften her frosty gaze. "Margaret," she said, her tone polite but laced with ice. "What brings you here?" "To see my daughter," I said, keeping my voice calm. I thought I'd surprise her. Her smile was brittle. "How thoughtful. She's out back, working on some projects." That single word, projects, dripped with disdain, as if Sophie were some lowly worker in their grand house. I stepped past her into the house, my presence unwanted but unstoppable. The cold rush of air conditioning hit me like a slap. Family photos lined the hallway, but the ones with Sophie and me were gone. Only images of her husband, David, and his parents remained, grinning from perfectly framed frames. "She's in the garden shed," Margaret said casually, as though delivering the day's weather report. "You can go through the kitchen." I walked across the lawn. There it was, the shed. Small, wooden, baking under the relentless sun. No shade, no protection. My heart sank. How had they done this to her? How had she endured this? I knocked on the door. "Mom!" Sophie's voice trembled, a mix of surprise and fear. I opened it and my breath caught. My daughter's face was red from heat. Sweat plastered her dark hair to her forehead. Behind her, a tiny cot, a plastic bin overflowing with clothes, and a tiny oscillating fan barely moved the thick air. A thermometer nailed to the wall read 105 degrees. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my attempt at calm. Sophie sank onto the cot. "Since David left for his contract 3 months. Margaret says no outsiders in the house when he's gone. I can only cook in the mornings. Sleep here at night. She calls it rustic charm, a character-building exercise." I knelt beside her. My daughter, strong and confident once, was hunched and broken. Dark circles under her eyes, cracked lips, heat exhaustion written across her body. This wasn't mere discomfort. This was cruelty, calculated, deliberate, and relentless. "Pack your things," I said, my voice firm. "Mom, I can't," Sophie whispered. "It'll hurt David's career, his future, if I make waves." I gritted my teeth. Sophie, remember what I taught you about bullies? You stand up to them, she said, a faint spark in her eyes. And if they hurt your family, you make them pay, she replied more steadily now. Exactly. I helped her to her feet. No more discussion. No more silent suffering. They declared war on you. Now they will see the cost. We walked back into the house. David Whitmore swirled a drink in his hand, his polite facade fading. Margaret Whitmore folded her arms, icy composure cracking at my presence. Care for a drink? David asked, trying to appear nonchalant. No, I said, my voice steady. We need to talk. Turned to Sophie. 3 months in a shed with temperatures over 100 degrees. You call this hospitality? Margaret Whitmore faltered. Temporary, proper, safe. Temporary, I said, anger rising. This is abuse. Isolation, humiliation, and control. You broke her spirit every single day. I listened as Sophie told me everything. The rules, the condescension, the constant surveillance. My blood boiled. They had weaponized her love for David to trap her in misery. They used your love against you, I whispered fiercely. This isn't just cruel, it's abuse. Emotional, financial, and physical. I didn't know what to do, Sophie admitted, tears in her eyes. Now you do, I said. We will expose them. Not through violence, not through illegal means, but through truth. Every lie they've told will crumble, and everyone who ever cared about them will see them for what they are. The next week became a whirlwind. I spoke to neighbors who had quietly observed injustices, professionals who had seen the Whitmores' behavior firsthand, and old acquaintances who were fed up with their false facade. Every small injustice became evidence. Affidavits, photos, sworn statements, all meticulously gathered. The day of the town committee meeting, the Whitmores arrived, confident as ever, unaware that the ground beneath them had shifted. They presented their application for a local grant, speaking of family values, community prestige, and exemplary standards. I stood, calm and composed, my heart pounding but my resolve unshakable. My name is Margaret Hayes, I began, my voice echoing clearly through the room. I'm here to present the truth about the Whitmore family's treatment of my daughter. I displayed photographs of the shed, Sophie's testimony, her medical records, and neighbor affidavits. Gasps echoed around the room. Margaret Whitmore tried to protest, but I pressed on. You humiliated her, isolated her, and broke her spirit, I said. And it ends today. Your application is denied. Authorities have been informed. Your reputation, built over generations, is no longer intact. The Whitmores were frozen. Shock, disbelief, and fear crossed their faces. My daughter's husband returned weeks later, his confusion turning into guilt, then resolve. He legally separated from his parents, cutting ties with their wealth and privilege. Sophie moved into a modest apartment, beginning work at a non-profit helping families navigate abuse. I converted the shed into a safe guest house for anyone trapped or mistreated, naming it Hayes House, Sanctuary. Justice was not instantaneous, but it was complete. For my daughter and me, it was real. We had turned fear, cruelty, and injustice into strength. A mother's love, after all, is not something that can be chained, humiliated, or broken. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of the story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.